I couldn't figure out why all these changes were happening. I felt pretty suicidal and depressed most days and would just cry for no reason. Everything was in the red. And I was like, what in the world is going on? I've never had abnormal labs. Stress and nervous system dysregulation prevented me from absorbing and assimilating vitamins. I don't ever give people more than 6 to 8 supplements at once or meds. And that's because if I give more than that, I'm doing green pharmacy. I'm just band-aiding. It's the same thing Western medicine does.
Can you walk us through the Kill Bind Sweat Detox program?
So lots of bacteria, lots of yeast, lots of parasites actually will die with this protocol. You're taking something to kill it, you're mopping it up and sweating it out. So people actually feel much better after this protocol, and a lot of their symptoms will start to resolve.
How are you assessing for mold to then correlate with the lab results?
People say all the time, is mold has been around thousands of years. Why is it a problem now? And that's very true. And the reason is,
hello and welcome back to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Emmy Brown here with my brilliant co-host, Melissa Gentile. Today we have the remarkable Dr. Jess Petros, commonly known as Dr. Jess. A former board-certified internal medicine hospitalist, Dr. Jess has transformed her career to become a leading figure in functional medicine and creator of the Kill Bind Sweat Detox program. She specializes in uncovering the root causes of chronic illnesses such as parasites, mold toxicity, tick-related illnesses, and hormone imbalances. Her approach focuses on opening detox pathways before beginning treatments, and she provides comprehensive guidance and resources through her Wellness Plus platform. With her holistic approach, Dr. Jess combines traditional medical knowledge with cutting-edge natural therapies to help patients achieve optimal health. Join us today as we dive into her unique methods and how she teaches patients to be their own best doctor. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Jess. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you guys doing? Thanks for the introduction.
Of course. Yes. We're so excited to dive into all these different topics and really your approach, because we've talked about these things before, but I think you have a really unique spin on things.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Jess, I'm so excited just to dive into these topics too with such an expert with detox like yourself. And I kind of want to go back a little bit right now and really start with your personal story and your journey, because I can imagine that's probably shaped a lot of your business and where you are today. So going back to your diagnosis with a B vitamin deficiency, how did you come to figure this out? Like, what were you experiencing? And then what did that really look like for you?
So that was a wild ride, actually. It's been the last about year and a half since I figured it out, or actually since I've had symptoms, I should say. And I really just thought, gosh, is this what menopause feels like? I felt like I was crawling out of my skin. I had anxiety and irritability for no reason. I was gaining weight and inflammation. I mean, my face even looked different. I had even asymmetry in my eyes. My left eye was higher than the other one. It was actually way noticeable. And I couldn't figure out why all these changes were happening. I felt pretty suicidal and depressed most days and would just cry for no reason. And I couldn't handle any sort of stress. It was like I didn't have emotional regulation almost. And it was so bad, it actually helped to destroy a relationship of mine, a romantic relationship of mine, where he couldn't hold space. No one knew what was wrong with me. And I actually ended up getting my labs. I got, CBC, CMP, some inflammation labs like CRP, C-reactive protein, ESR, homocysteine. And I was at Joe Dispenza. I was at a week-long Joe Dispenza event, actually, in November. And my labs came back. And we were on break, and I just happened to open them up, and everything was in the red. And I was like, what in the world is going on? I've never had abnormal labs. But I guess it was sort of validating when you felt terrible as well. And, you could see the MCV, MPV, red blood cell size, all of that stuff in the red on my CBC, indicating, problems with folate and B12. What was interesting, which I've used as a teaching point quite a bit, is that my serum, my blood level B12 was actually high normal. It was 600 some. And so, but the CDC gave it away. And the way I was feeling and my inflammation, my CRP was 8, it should have been less than 3. There was a lot of, my vitamin D was 27, a lot of abnormals where the inflammation was preventing absorption. I was eating red meat, which has B vitamins and vitamin D. I was eating that. I was eating
It's like a
eggs.
functional deficiency, it sounds like.
It was a stress. The stress and nervous system dysregulation prevented me from absorbing and assimilating vitamins. And so I went and I thought, gosh, this has to have a little bit of drastic, I have to take drastic choices. I have to make different choices here. So I went and immediately at Joe Dispenza, got Instacarted a methylated B vitamin complex to the event. And I took 2 of them, and it was like in Pleasantville, that movie where everything goes from black and white to color.
Yes, that's such a good visual.
And I instantly, my friend who was with me at the event said, "You're like a different person." She noticed, because it made me kind of victim. Like I was just down in the dumps almost. And I felt like it had 5 cups of coffee a little bit. And I after that, when I went home, I started to get vitamin IVs, Myers cocktails with vitamin C, glutathione, all the B vitamins, all the minerals, because I could see where I had been so stressed out and traumatized over the last few years. I was dumping minerals out of my body. It didn't really matter what I ate. When your body is out of homeostasis like that, you're not able to process anything. I wasn't. And I am like a different person these days. People online who don't even know me comment and say, "You look different. Your energy is different." I hear that quite a bit. And I will forever sing the praises of how important B vitamins and mineralization is to bringing people back to homeostasis, even before you start drainage and detox.
That's a really frustrating place to be, because it's like you said earlier, you were eating red meat, you were eating all the nourishing foods, you were like taking care of yourself, and you're like, why do all my labs look crazy? It looks like I'm not, like I don't care about my diet. So that's really interesting. I don't think we've had anyone on here yet that's really talked about the correlation between stress and your body dumping minerals, is kind of what you were saying. It's a really interesting way to approach it. So I know you mentioned in the beginning that one of your symptoms was weight gain with the B vitamin deficiency. And to clarify, was this like all B vitamins, or was it you said B12 was high?
In the serum, let me get back to that teaching point really quick. But it's actually notoriously wrong in the serum labs. I wasn't absorbing it. So what they need to get, I've told many people this now, is a urine methylmalonic acid, or MMA, which measures whether you're absorbing and then able to urinate out the B vitamins. And so I'm sure that number in my labs would have shown that I had a deficiency, but it was never ordered. So again, people say, "Oh, look, my CBC has been messed up for years, but my B12 is high." And I'll say, no, not yet, right? Because it doesn't mean that your body is absorbing, processing, assimilating properly.
You're not getting it in the cells.
Correct.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, so that kind of paints the picture a little bit better. So it was high on the lab, but it wasn't getting into the cells. And like you mentioned, you said weight gain was one of those symptoms that you had struggled with before you found out, before you got your labs back. What did that weight loss journey look like? Like, what challenges did you face? Was it as simple as getting those methylated B vitamins in the IV drips, or was it more of a healing process?
It was definitely a healing process. It was not something that was welcomed on my part. I went through a really nasty breakup, and that forced me out of the vibration and wavelength of toxicity I was in. And even though I was hardwired, because I was with this person for 6 years in a similar environment, I still was devastated over it. And once I got over that and started to attend Joe Dispenza and learn how to manifest, instead of thinking or saying the things I don't want, maybe you should think and say the things you do want. Imagine that, and how to get your thoughts aligned with what you want in life. So Joe Dispenza, I've been to 2, I'm going to go to 3 events now in this November with Joe, because he's helped me so much. So it was about, I went to a brain clinic and I discovered I had an emotional traumatic brain injury that probably spun out my loss of minerals and caused leaky gut and all the other things I was suffering with that added to inflammation that prevented me from absorbing those minerals from my food. So it was this trajectory of learning and unraveling about myself and about my thoughts and my habits. And I was sort of forced into this new vibration that I didn't want to be in at first after the breakup. But it ended up being my saving grace because I got out of a toxic relationship. I ended up ending the toxic thoughts that weren't exactly mine to begin with. And then I could feel comfortable. I didn't feel safe. And how can your body heal if you don't feel safe? How can you stop the trajectory of dis-ease if you're not at ease?
So well put. So insightful.
And I couldn't. And I'm a doctor and I see things pretty clearly, even if it's hard when it's yourself, but I see things pretty clearly. And I couldn't stop that train until I got out of that environment that was signaling the genes improperly.
Lot to unpack there. But I see a lot of hope in that message, Dr. Jess. So I love that we're kind of kicking it off on this very deep level as far as trying to get our mind in a very positive place. So I think that that's really, really important to remember as we go through some of the more physical aspects of your approach. So, and on that note, in general, what is unique about how you practice functional medicine? Because I do want to get into the details of the Kill Bind Sweat, but generally, what makes your practice unique, Dr. Jess?
I think that, I think it's not maybe that unique as it was, 10 years ago. If everyone's waking up, I think everyone's getting on the same sort of path about how to teach people in the functional world. But as an MD, I think what made me novel in the beginning was that I would sit for an hour with patients and listen to their story. And it was almost more of a therapy session sometimes than straight medicine. And I think that was unusual for people, especially a decade ago. I also think that I'm able to have kind of a big picture view of people's body and health. And I think that a lot of doctors and practitioners are in the weeds. I don't think it's that difficult to understand the body. I think a layperson can understand their body. I think they can understand what is best for them. I don't think they have to outsource every single piece of knowledge about their body. And that is, I think, a novel approach for a lot of people who want to have maybe a superiority or God complex in the practitioner seat. And I really want the client or the patient to be driving their health journey and their decisions and what they decide to eat and do, because I'm not with them 9-10 hours a day. I'm with them an hour a month, maybe. And it's up to them to become their own best doctor and understand why. So I pride myself on taking very complex scientific subjects and topics, being able to break it down so anyone can understand how their body works and why we're taking the approach that we're taking. And for me, that means your body is never wrong. And it is a machine and a vessel that is near perfect. And we live in a toxic society with toxic people and toxic thoughts and toxic everything. And that's what's wrong, not your body. Your body is actually always trying to protect you and always warning you. We ignore it. We have the wrong perspective. And so can we change the mindset about that your body is not broken and you don't have faulty genes? And then from there, what is inside your body that doesn't belong there? What is missing from your body that should be there? Is your nervous system a wreck? I can't give you no protocol will stick until you regulate your nervous system. None of them. So I have to calm you down and get you to see a different light and have some hope and positivity. And then I have to say, do you have things like root canals and mercury fillings? Do you have breast implants? Do you have water damage in your home? Look, it's not your genes. Look, it's not your genes. It's the environment signaling your genes. And then there's more hope built and more rapport built. And then people start believing they actually can see a light at the end of the tunnel. And then you're climbing over the top of that hill at that point. You have to win them over.
What tools do you use, Dr. Jess, before we get into the specifics to help educate patients? Is there, I imagine, a whiteboard maybe in your office, or if you're working virtually, are you bringing up some kind of share your screen, or is there, I always imagined an app would be so cool if there was kind of an interactive educational app that I could maybe, I don't want to call it homework. That's not appealing to patients, but what do you use to really empower and educate patients?
Right. So I do share my screen a lot. You're right. I often bring up like PowerPoints and things of presentations I give. I have one on the nervous system. So I'll show people about dorsal freeze in the vagal tone, or ventricle or ventral vagal tone. And so them say, you want actually the polyvagal theory, you want to be able to feel connected, be able to make decisions. And I have a whole chart that I show them how this happens from freeze or fight or fight, beyond that to freeze, where a lot of people are. So I like to show graphics, like to show visuals to people. I like to explain very complex topics and explain medical words and terms to people and say, this is what this means. And they go, oh yeah. It's just about saying the right things to them. And then I often try and make them proactive, or what I think they can accomplish, even if it's just one new thing a day. And I use a lot of biohacks with people. A lot of I don't ever give people more than 6 to 8 supplements at once, or meds, and that's because we start things slowly. Because if I give more than that, I'm doing green pharmacy. I'm just band-aiding. Yeah, it's the same thing Western medicine does. Why don't we, if the body works as a whole, we should have 6 to 8 targeted supplements that really bring the body back. And you don't need 15. You don't need 30. That's what I did as a hospitalist in the hospital.
You don't want to go back there, yeah.
No, so there's a lot of things I employ, and I will bring dentists, I will bring postural restoration specialists, I will bring neurofeedback, whatever the person needs into there, I will outsource as needed if it's not my specialty.
I have to know, Dr. Jess, you said biohacks, and that's such a buzzword right now, so I can't let that go.
It's okay.
Please elaborate.
You see behind me right here, that's a hyperbaric oxygen chamber.
Yes.
So that's one of my favorites. I actually bought for my dog who has a brain tumor, but people can use it too. That was the selling point, actually. and
was that a bark I just heard?
Yeah,
right
you
on
did.
cue.
You did actually on cue, right on.
Yeah.
So magic. And then I have something called a flow presso, which is in one of the spare bedrooms over here, and that is what looks like a full body Michelin man suit, and it's for the lymphatic system. And you can program it, and it starts as almost like a warm hug. It has some microcirculation and heat. And it starts like hugging from the feet, up the leg, up the torso, all the way to the heart, and then the arms will squeeze towards the heart. And so it's like a gentle, warm hug that's very rhythmic. So people fall asleep. Some people cry. It's very beautiful. So those are one of my two favorite biohacks. Probably also love neurofeedback. I also love ozone. I really do walk the walk, you guys. I have my my ozone generator right here. So yeah, I have a cold plunge in my backyard. I have a sauna downstairs. The sauna obviously is part of Kill Bind Sweat and is probably the one I use the most personally.
I do have to ask very quickly, because I know that cold plunging is super popular and I was doing it for a little bit, but when you're dealing with someone right out the gate and their nervous system is dysregulated, do you often hold off on cold therapy just by chance? Is it too much stress on the body?
I will tell you, I hate cold plunging. It's my least favorite biohack in the world. I
love that you say that. Yeah, you have one, and
I have one.
You know there's benefit, it seems.
I hate it. I do. You have to I have to count backwards and jump in. Like you have to walk in, I'll just turn and walk back out. No. When it hits my stomach, I'm like, yeah. So
that's the worst.
So I'm such a baby about it. So, but they do say the way you deal with a cold is an analogy for how you deal with stress in life, actually. So, I can breathe through it. I can stay in there 3 minutes. I hate every second of it. So they probably hate stress that much too in my life. But yes, you're correct, Melissa. I would not put someone in there who's really in fight or in functional freeze. They need to kind of come back a little bit more before just shocking their body. It's a stress on the body, which is great. But if they're already stressed out, that's not very great.
Mm-hmm.
You
have to tell me twice to stay out of that.
I also says she hates it. We're going to leave that off. And it's a tool of many.
I do. It's wonderful. It has benefits, but it's the hardest one for me.
It is a tough one. I will say it is a little bit easier if you're going right from the sauna, because it's like your body's already so hot. But yeah, just jumping in those things, it's a lot. Yeah, takes some getting used to for sure.
I'm all about the heat. Like I can tolerate the heat like a champ. So I think people are one way or the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. So on that note, Dr. Jess, can you walk us through the Kill Bind Sweat Detox program?
Absolutely. We actually have a Fresh Start program on Wellness Plus right now, and I just did the Kill Bind Sweat webinar last night with everyone, so it's fresh. So this actually caught on by accident. I was talking about getting in the sauna, taking a binder, and then sweating, and I tagged Kill Bind Sweat online, the hashtagged it, and it went kind of viral, and everyone started reposting it. And it's funny because it sounds very like, what in the world is that catchy S&M type of thing? You don't know Kill, Bind, and Sweat, what that is.
Very
And very interesting. And it's very practical and simple and affordable. So most people can figure out how to do it at home and be successful. And so I think that's why it also is it's successful for people. What can you sweat out, guys? Why is sweating, and what is sweating? What is binding? What is this killing stuff? So kill is taking an herbal antimicrobial of your choice, depending on what you're dealing with, or oil of oregano, garlic. I have a lot of favorites that I love, and wormwood. All these things are wonderful for parasites, for bacteria, for yeast. So, whatever your killing supplement of choice is or herb of choice is, wait about 30 minutes. So most of that is absorbed and digested, and then take a binder of your choice. Activated charcoal is probably my least favorite because it only stays in the gut. It doesn't go systemically.
That's a huge pearl.
Yes.
So what are you liking instead?
I love things like, it depends on what people are dealing with. Something like modified citrus pectin actually crosses the blood-brain barrier. So if people are having neurologic problems or children, that's a great one for something like pandas. If people are looking for a systemic binder, I really love fulvic and humics if you have a really good clean source. And that's because they're able to turn on certain enzymatic pathways in the body and the immune system, as well as binding up inorganic heavy metals that are more dangerous. So I love things like that. I really look for a good source when it comes to a binder and third-party testing, however, though. And then right after you take the binder, you can get in the sauna, and you're actually mopping up the things you're killing off and then sweating it out of the body. And so many pathogens can't withstand the heat. So lots of bacteria, lots of yeast, lots of parasites actually will die with this protocol. You're taking something to kill it, you're mopping it up and sweating it out. So people actually feel much better after this protocol, and a lot of their symptoms will start to resolve. And that's because it's a catch-all, because you can sweat out things like heavy metals, things like cadmium and arsenic and mercury in small studies come out sweat easier than urine or feces. Things like PCBs or forever chemicals can be broken down this way. And then you're giving your heat shock proteins, you're activating those, which give misfolded proteins a chance to refold again. And this is what causes disease. You got to think of something like Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative conditions. It gives the proteins a second chance to behave, if you will. And so this program is, if you don't have a sauna, take a hot bath, work out. Most people can find a way to do this program.
Makes sense. A lot of benefit there. And what about frequency and course? Is this something, say someone's feeling pretty good or you're just trying to maintain them? I imagine, I don't know about daily antimicrobials, but the sweat, obviously that's going to be great daily if we can keep up with that, regardless of how we're sweating. But what is a course, I guess, if you are using this to actively treat?
If you're actively treating, I tell people, everyone's different. If you're really sensitive to heat, maybe you get in for 10 minutes a day and you add a minute onto the sauna. The ultimate goal is 30 to 40 minutes in the sauna, where you break a sweat within like 10 to 15 minutes. That means your sweat pathway is open. And you want to aim for 3 to 4 times per week. I definitely don't want to demineralize anyone. So it's really important that people get fresh juices in, or you're putting in minerals in your water, something like ketone minerals, or just, any sort of ionic trace minerals too are great. And really replace those as you sweat, because your body is looking for sodium, not as much water. It's looking to replace those electrolytes. And so I would say, if you're treating something 3 to 4 times per week, if you're just maintaining, maybe once or twice. So that's probably a pretty healthy thing for people to aim for.
Okay, fair. And speaking of sweating, Dr. Jess, what are drainage pathways and how do we know if they're functioning optimally?
Drainage pathways are something that everyone knows about, even if you don't know what I'm talking about when I'm saying this right now. So naturopathic doctors call them emunctories. And so you probably know, Dr. Emmy, what they are, all of them. And you guys know too, it's your bowels. If you're constipated, your bowel drainage pathway might be stagnant or blocked. There are things like bile, liver, sweat. We already talked about one of them, and you'll know if that's open if you're sweating within 10 to 15 minutes in a sauna, getting in a sauna. Things like, even mitochondria or cellular health, even our cycles as women can count as drainage pathways because we do release toxins out of that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are a lot of different ones, kidneys, lungs, all of these matter and need to be open. And the way I explain this to people is this matters because think if you're sick and I have a magic limitless pill I can give you that cures every one of your problems and you're not ill anymore. That pill would still have to be taken, swallowed, digested, broken down, assimilated and absorbed by the body. And then somehow your body has to get the pill and the remnants out. So your body's magic still has to work even with a magic pill. And so we better have it open. So whatever is entering your body on a daily basis, you're breathing it in, you're absorbing it in, you're eating it, whatever's happening, your body goes, oh, that's a foreign intruder that doesn't belong here. And instead of it getting stuck in the lymphatic or fascial systems, it actually is pooped out or sweated out or peed out, or your liver processes it properly. And so that's how we stay healthy when things enter our body that don't belong here. We have to be open to release things. And so that means if you don't poop at every, week or so, you probably have lots of brain fog from all the toxins.
What steps do you take if some of these drainage pathways are closed off or not working? I know sweating is kind of a more obvious one to personally assess for when you get in the sauna, do you start sweating within 10 minutes or not? What about kidney and liver? How do you know if that's working right or lymphatic? What do you do there?
These are great questions. I actually have a lot of these questions on Wellness Plus for people because I see people want to know, am I okay? How do I screen myself? And it's a great way to become your best doctor. So your bowels, you really want to be going 1 to 3 times per day. And that doesn't mean let's normalize talking about poop here, I guess. So that doesn't mean they're constipated rabbit pellets. That doesn't mean it falls apart with ragged edges in the toilet, which means there's inflammation in the gut. So we want things to be well formed, if you will. And then let's say the bile, that's another one people don't know how to screen. Things like, do you have itchy skin? Do you see undigested food in your stool? Do you have problems with, fat digestion? And a lot of this can be picked apart on certain lab work, blood work as well too. And then things like, with the liver, how do you process caffeine? How do you process alcohol? Do you have hangovers for days? How do you do with fasting? Are you homicidal? You want to kill your husband?
I saw that one in your FAQs and I thought, ooh, that's a really good one.
Yeah, because the liver breaks down glycogen into smaller packets of glucose to sustain your blood sugar in between meals. And if it can't do that, you're gonna be raging.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about that one from a fasting perspective there. Wow.
And metabolically, you could go into a whole other, down a rabbit hole in terms of flexibility metabolically.
Yes, totally. So, people, you can see it even their eyes, they'll have dark sunken in eyes if their liver isn't working properly because it's connected on the same meridians in Chinese medicine. So these little hints that sometimes, it doesn't always show in the blood work with an AST and ALT and the liver enzymes. It doesn't always show. And then, things like you mentioned the kidneys. So a urinalysis can really help us to see if there's protein or anything like that, blood in the urine. But in general, if people aren't hydrating well, they have a lot of fear and worry. That's an emotion associated with the kidneys. And there's a lot of different lab work we can look at with it too. Just looking at glomerular filtration rate and BUN and creatinine helps us some too as well. Things like the lungs, people waking up between, 3 and 5 a.m., which is lung time. There's grief and sorrow in the lungs. And then, just breath work in general. If people are shallowly breathing, I can guarantee they have lungs that don't expand fully and have something called atelectasis, which is almost like crud at the bottom of the lungs. So there are ways that we can screen these people, and depending on their labels or diagnoses they've gotten, it will also lead to point in directions about what drainage pathway is a little stagnant. But I have a list of questions that people can ask themselves to see where they're stagnant.
Yeah, that is so helpful.
Yeah.
Again, especially like those liver questions, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, ooh, caffeine. Yeah, like that definitely stays in my system for a little too long. And
Mhm.
do patients usually experience detox symptoms when they start a protocol like this? I know I've heard some practitioners say like, oh, you shouldn't, if you're doing it right, you shouldn't have too many symptoms. But then there's other practitioners that are like, no, you're getting these toxins out. You're going to experience some symptoms. So what's your approach? Is it different for everyone? What can we kind of expect or look out for when embarking on this protocol?
Yeah, great question. So, honestly, I feel like it's so patient dependent. It's so bio individual on everyone. Of course, I try my best to avoid any sort of healing detox reactions, but occasionally you get a client or patient that reacts to almost water
Mm.
and any supplement in the world they're reactive to. And at that point, you have to pull yourself back and say, this person is going to react to a drainage protocol. They're going to react to a detox protocol later on. So I have to fix their nervous system because their nervous system is, they all have mast cell activation, histamine problems, all of them. And they're all, most of the time, I don't want to stereotype anyone, but most of the time they're type A women who have problems letting go of control. And so their body is releasing histamine based on their thoughts and their inability to feel safe when there's a lack of control.
I've seen
And
this being talked about a little bit
Yeah.
in the wellness space, and I really blame the culture, not the women. So I just want to throw that out there that I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Jess.
yeah, I love that you said that. It's absolutely the culture. And their women just are trying to be superwoman and do everything. And it's not how we're been meant to be, especially as we get older. We're meant to kind of calm down and have a more relaxed life, not be superwoman. And so it's, I see these women quite a bit. And so when that happens and they're reacting to every supplement, they start reacting to every food, it's the nervous system. And I have to not do any drainage. It's really about teaching the practitioners when to pull back and see that it's not something that needs to be killed all the time.
Hmm.
You know?
I really like that approach, or that, that thought there, because it's not always going to be something that you can just head on and start attacking with ozone and antimicrobials and, really hectic protocols. So when you do have a patient like that is so hypersensitive and their nervous system is kind of all over the place and they have this histamine and mast cell activation issue, what does the timeline look like for healing the nervous system? Because I'm sure that's probably a big question. People are like, okay, so how soon can I get better?
This is the hardest thing I deal with. And the only thing that is equivalent to being almost as hard is when people have to move out of a water damaged home that they love. Seriously. This is the hardest thing because, you can imagine, I tell people, think how hard it is to change yourself. And I'm asking you to change. It's really hard. And you've been hardwired this way to protect yourself, maybe since your childhood. So it's you're doing what's familiar, but not what's best for you. And I literally have to kind of pep talk them. And then I outsource quite a bit to things like primal trust, dynamic neural retraining systems, Dr. Gupta's program, which teaches people how to be a human being again and slow down and feel into their body instead of being up here thinking in their head all the time. And that's foreign to a lot of people, especially women right now who are multitasking their little butts off all the time. And so it's really about, and then you know what else I do? I also add a ton of minerals to their protocol, and that's all we do in the first month. That's all we do. I am going to make sure that they're liquid. I'm going to make sure that things are liposomal. And sometimes, depending on their genetics, if they know it, I'll add something for a slow COMT, which makes people an anxious mess and they can't sleep at night. Stuff like SAMe and L-theanine and things to calm them down and then remineralize their nervous system because they don't have minerals. When that cortisol goes really, really high, at first it's high and you start conserving salt. blood pressure goes up, all your heart rate goes up. But over time, the kidneys start dumping sodium out. Cortisol falls low, gets chewed up too quickly, and then they start dumping potassium, magnesium, and calcium, and then they can't emotionally regulate at all. And anything I give them, they're going to react to until I replace that and calm them down. And it's a multi-pronged approach with outsourcing to a nervous system program, remineralizing, adding things for their genetics so they sleep better.
Boom.
Yeah, there we have it.
I'm sure
That's
easier
it.
said than done, but it absolutely helps to have a framework like that laid out. So thank you for that.
It can be anywhere from, depending on the person, anywhere from a couple months to sometimes years, where people really are their own worst enemy working through things. And I don't want to talk about clients that way, but I'm my own worst enemy. I don't mean any offense with that. So we all are. Yeah.
Right.
And real quick, I do want to squeeze this question. This came up when you were just mentioning how cortisol can be really high in the beginning, like during the stressful event, but then after a while you end up with like low cortisol and this like HPA axis, dysfunction. And I see that a lot. And I'm wondering if you're going through like a nervous system program, and I feel like that's usually a lot of exercises and things to put you in a calm state. But people with low cortisol are probably fatigued all the time. Is that still the kind of practices that they should be going through? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sometimes it depends on the person. Sometimes people they will shock me. I will not believe that they have any sort of nervous system dysregulation. They look totally calm and cool, and they will be a mess inside their head. So I like to test and not guess and see really what's going on with them first. I love Vibrance test with cortisol as well. The hormone test is super helpful because it helps me know if it's being chewed up or if it's too high. And so I don't ever think the adrenals actually burn out. They don't ever stop making cortisol. It's just the processing of it is askew. The way the brain thinks about it and talks to things is
all
askew.
Feedback loops.
Correct. And so when people are fatigued like that, they still need to get inside their body. They're still not inside their body. They're in their heads. So I often like it, but I'll prescribe those protocols a little bit later to those people. I don't give it right off the bat. We do mineralization. I do a lot of therapy talk sessions with them and pep talks. Sometimes I'll add something else based on their individuality, but I don't do it right out of the gates with them. That's something that comes later on for those people because they're burnt out. They're past flight or fight. And you have to go real easy.
I'd love to get into the stealth infections and mold, parasites being a really hot topic. How do you like to assess for parasites, Dr. Jess?
So parasites are so tricky. And first and foremost, I want to say that if you look at the kind of the lines of discovery of when we think parasites came about, they're as old as humans. And so they're not bad at their jobs, which is hiding. They're not bad at their jobs. And so it takes a very astute test to be able to pick up on them. And I always want to match it with symptomatology of the client or the patient, always. Because I don't think parasites, you're never going to fully get rid of them all, in my opinion, the eggs, the larvae. We are part of the ecosystem that they are a part of. It's are they running rampant, and what is attracting them and making your body hospitable? Right? So that's what needs to be addressed. So I often look at toxins and trauma to see why they're there. But in general, I ask patients questions like this to see if the parasites are overrunning their body. Do you grind your teeth at night? Sore jaws, clicking jaws, TMJ type of stuff. Do you have a dairy sensitivity or lactose intolerance? Do you have digestive issues like bloating? SIBO often has an underlying component of parasites with it. Small intestinal bowel overgrowth, guys. And then, or bacterial overgrowth, excuse me. And then I would say rectal itching, which is always a fun question for everyone.
Yep.
Oftentimes people have eye floaters, eye disturbances, blurry vision, almost like they will with mold as well. They'll have interesting things like muscle twitches. Often their symptoms like anxiety and insomnia will be worse around the full moon, which mirrors the parasite's life cycle, actually. And sometimes people have mood disorders. One thing that's connected to something, a co-infection of something like Babesia, people can have rage episodes with that in Bartonella. They can have shortness of breath. They can have night sweats. There's so many different things that parasites can cause. There are thousands of parasites, and 30% of them are microscopic. So they're hard to catch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You touched on toxins. I think you said toxins and emotions, but I want to unpack this connection between heavy metals and parasites. What is your thought as far as why so many of us maybe have parasites, whether we know it or not? And is it maybe, are parasites trying to protect us from heavy metals? Are we starting with metals first? What are we thinking here?
I actually think you start with nervous system roadblocks like breast implants and root canals, then you go to drainage, then you go to parasites. And so parasites are trying to protect us. I like that you said that. But even things that are trying to protect us can be overrun and produce byproducts like ammonia, which is not good for anyone.
It can backfire.
Yeah. So we need to kind of say, what is the root cause here? And you mentioned metals, which is great. We don't have a lot of human studies on this, if any, but we do have some animal studies. And there's something called a fish cestode, which is a parasite inside fish. And what we found is that it can carry 6 times more the heavy metals than we thought the fish could have inside its body and be alive. And that's because it's eating and digesting these metals. And so we've seen it in animal studies, which we are part of the ecosystem. I'd love to see this in human studies, but we have yet to see those. So it's kind of extrapolating that and saying we're all, exposed to metals. We're all exposed to industrial toxins, all of these things. Could these things like bacteria, which digest organic waste, parasites, which are on the same thing, they like to live in the host and help eat and digest things. Mold helps to eat decaying things as well. So if you have decaying, putrefying things in your gut that aren't digesting properly, you're sort of it's more opportunistic for things like parasites and bacteria to invade you. You're more hospitable.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so we talked about kind of how do you approach this, what do you tackle first? So that's extremely helpful. And I want to get into the mold a little bit more. Such a huge topic, right? And you touched on environmental mold when you said water damaged buildings, but what about food-based molds? Are some people more sensitive than others? Can you see mold illness in a completely mold-free environment, yet a person who's eating a moldy diet? Are their presentations similar? Are they different?
Good question. So I don't see it as much when people live in a mold-free environment. It's usually, if it's moldy food by itself, it's usually getting them because there's something like a parasite or something else lowering their immunity, and that's just piling on top of it. These things act as frenemies. They act together all the time. So I would say, yeah, there are people sensitive enough though to feel mold in food. 1000% they are. And, I know them. Some of them are my friends, and you're going to have to watch for things like, corn and grains and chocolate, unfortunately, and coffee. Unfortunately, I know it hurts my heart, but it's just the truth. And when we look at the animal studies, we see that farmers spend a heck of a lot of money each year to put binders that are efficacious in the feed, because when things sit in silos, they grow mold and they feed its moldy feed to the animals. And then guess what happened in the studies? The piglets were born with extra large labias because they had an estrogen dominance from the mold that is an estrogen mimicker in their food.
It's horrifying.
So they spend millions of dollars each year to bind this up so this doesn't happen to their pigs and their cows. So what does that mean for us if we're eating moldy grains? What does that mean for humans? Mm-hmm. We're similar. We don't have those studies in humans, but we see it. We hear people talk about this and then we don't believe them. But this is science. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that people have to be careful food if they're super sensitive. If you're super sensitive, yeah, be really mindful. Look for some mold-free coffee, please.
Which ones are your favorite? Have to know.
Oh, yeah, I have my favorite. Okay. So I love Organo King coffee. I drink their Royal.
That's what I'm
And they're
drinking right now, actually. I love that.
yes, I
Yes.
approve. I love it. So I had that this morning actually. It's reishi spores, turkey tail, all the different mushrooms in the royal, and then there's king coffee, which is just 80,000 reishi spores. So what's nice about that is this is mold-free organic instant coffee with mushrooms in it. And so for people who really can't handle caffeine, let's say your liver is stagnant, or you might have some genetic SNPs that make you a slower processor of coffee, which
That's
actually that is just a genetic SNP that can be turned on or off.
neat.
So if we work with the
Oh.
liver, we can sometimes adjust that for you. Sometimes. So you know, so guys like you're gonna love that because the reishi spores in there help to calm the nervous system with the mold-free organic coffee. So you can handle it, right, Melissa?
Yeah, like I actually don't feel too bad. I mean, I put some collagen and a few other things in there to make it a little bit more substantial. Some minerals actually too. But yeah, like I don't get the craziness that comes with normal coffee or cold brew sometimes.
Exactly. Exactly. So there you go. So there's ways to like overcome these things. But I do love Dave Asprey's Danger Coffee. I think it's very good as well. Dave Asprey had CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And so he was always really on the mold-free coffee kick because he was educated early on because of his own health journey. And, you know, I think those are probably my two favorites that I go to with it. But I'm not someone who's sensitive. So I can probably eat so much mold and I would never know. So bad.
Yeah. But we're all different in that way. And we have to
Yes.
clinically correlate these things. And that brings me to testing. It's very common to see food and environmental based mycotoxins on a urine test. Then we have to do further assessment though. So clinically, how are you assessing for mold to then correlate with the lab results?
So my favorite test on the entire planet is the total tox test. I love it so much because it tells me about toxins, which attract the pathogens like glyphosate, plastics, pesticides, rubber. It also tells me all about the mycotoxins, a urine mycotoxin test, and it tells me heavy metals. So all these are reasons that people might have a problem with recurrent infections. And so it's kind of a test with all the ones in one I want to see. But I will tell you, they have a lot of new novel mold testing out there. And they even have immunological blood testing, which shows if your immune system is reacting to mold. It's cool, but I need to know what species of mold we're dealing with. So I really love urine mycotoxin tests for that reason. And that's my go-to. Although there's drawbacks and pros and cons to every test. And the more testing you can get, the better off the client or patient is. I also like to test the home that people are living in too. If we think it's suspect, then I'm going to look to match up the molds in the body with the mold in the home.
Right.
Although that isn't always the case. Your body can get colonized for years, actually, in the sinus cavities, even if after you've moved it out of the water damaged home. So great news with that.
Gosh,
it's going to follow you.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, how do we set up our home to be mold free? Like air filters. I mean, obviously, if your home is ridden with mold and sometimes you have to move out, it's not treatable. But when you're moving into a new place or just kind of in a maintenance phase, what are some of the tools that you're using or things that you're doing?
Absolutely. So the thing that people say all the time is mold has been around thousands of years. Why is it a problem now? And that's very true. And the reason is because we're using toxic building supplies and that are not normal or natural to Earth sometimes at all. I mean, have you seen people build their houses? They expose the wood to the elements. It just rains on everything. They keep building the house. And then particle boards should never get wet. We use things like asbestos and gypsum or drywall, which is food for black mold called stachyboitres. And when it gets wet, it ironically is called drywall and it never dries. Like
it's ironic.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's, we use toxic adhesives, carpets, all these things in the homes. And then when they get wet, of course, a pathogen or mycotoxin spore is going to be there to digest the things that get wet and are decaying because it's a toxin we're using to build homes. And then on top of that, we have energy efficient homes where we don't allow proper airflow. That's not how nature intended. The way we keep mold at bay is through airflow and low humidity. We have very humid houses where the humidity is above 60%. We have energy efficient, airtight homes. And then we do stupid things like put vents in bathrooms that vent up to the ceiling, so you have a mold sandwich house. They vent up to the attic, instead of out of the house. So that creates, actually a mold sandwich within the house and makes very sensitive people sick. So it's really about looking at how we're building against nature and making people sick this way.
I love the visual, Dr. Jess, a mold sandwich. And your dog does not approve.
No,
very clearly.
He was very scared about that, clearly.
Vocal. That is so helpful. And it is really just a call to action that I don't think we can really voice enough. And as we're coming up on the hour, Dr. Jess, we could really unpack all of these pearls on and on and on. But I'd love to know, as a traditionally trained provider yourself originally, what advice do you have for other traditionally trained providers who want to practice more holistically and get into functional medicine if maybe they're intimidated and don't know where to start?
Absolutely. I didn't know where to start either. So, really look into the Institute of Functional Medicine. There's a lot of trainings that even Vibrant Wellness provides on how to read functional tests. I know that can be intimidating for a lot of the conventional docs. And, if you're stuck because of money, just know that you can really get trained and become a stellar business person and have a whole other life where you're not dependent on hospital pay or paying a system that you may not fully align with any longer. So I think a lot of fear keeps people unhappy in their comfort zone. And if you need a push, this is your push. There's a lot of trainings, things are opening up. And the more you move towards more root cause and functional approach, I feel like the more successful in the long run you'll end up being. So, there's tons of health coaching schools out there. There's tons of institutes out there. It's really just about doing your research and looking at what aligns with your area of expertise.
I really love that messaging because it's like you can have it all. You can have the expertise, you can help dozens of patients, you can get out of the system that you're in, and you can have the successful business. You really can do it all.
And you're proof of that,
and be
Dr.
happy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
very inspiring.
It's possible. Thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Jess. This interview has been so amazing. Like, there's so many moments where I'm like taking mental notes. Like, I'm going to have to go back and re-listen and rewatch and, take notes on all of this. You gave us so many good, insightful resources and everything, and so much information that we haven't really touched on this podcast yet. And selfishly, I'm curious, if I want to learn more about your protocol and everything, where can myself and our listeners find you online?
Absolutely. I always tell people there are tiers to kind of working with me or taking in knowledge. There's the free way, which is social media. So myself and my team are very active on there. So it's at Dr.JESS.MD. And then at W+ with Dr. Jess is my platform as well. And then that's the free information. I give a lot on there. I also have a website where Dr. Emmy found my FAQs, which is drjessmd.com. And that's a free website, tons of blogs and information on there too, if you guys like to read. And then finally, if you want the creme de la creme, if you will, that's Wellness Plus, and that's app.drjessmd.com. And we do open office hours. I come on there every 2 weeks and answer everyone's questions. We have an uncensored community forum. We have hand-holding protocols and courses for everyone, and root cause quickies that tell you conventional and holistic root cause and treatments for probably 200 different disorders. So.
Wow, I love this. Lots of resources for everyone tuning in. The uncensored forum. Okay, you caught me there. I need to go learn, deep dive into that and see what's in there. But
yes, would love to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jess, just for taking the time today to be on the podcast. This was such an amazing conversation, and just thank you for all the value that you provide online with everything you did today and just the work that you're doing. And to everyone tuning in, thanks for tuning in. And until next week, wishing us all vibrant health and wellness.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guest and host are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.